Joining us now, House of Delegates member from Virginia. He's a Republican. His name is Nick Freitas. And Nick, on Friday night at the Republican Party of Virginia's advance in Hot Springs, Virginia, at the Omni Hotel, at his hospitality suite, he made it official. He is a candidate for the United States Senate in 2018. He's a Republican, hoping to get the nomination in order to square off against Tim Kaine, heavily favored in the general in 2018. And Nick Freitas is one of three candidates now officially in that race, along with former gubernatorial candidate Corey Stewart, who was the early front runner without a doubt, and who we just had on our show earlier announcing his candidacy, former nominee for Lieutenant Governor E.W. Jackson. This race will be settled in a June 12th primary. Joining us now, Nick Freitas. Nick, good to have you with us, man.
Thanks for having me on, John.
Okay, the big question is this. Corey Stewart, in talking to people at the advance on Friday in Hot Springs, and now, you just heard at 8:30 a.m., E.W. Jackson, both of them saying, look, Nick Freitas is the establishment Republican candidate in the race. Corey Stewart going so far in an article the other day, I think in the Washington Post, I believe, or one of the other publications, said, look, Nick Freitas met with Mitch McConnell's bozos, and he's going to be the establishment candidate. Yet when you look at your record, you're not really considered to be establishment for anything. How does this whole thing going to wash out, and how do you respond to those immediate attacks?
Well, again, if Corey specifically said that I met with Mitch McConnell, if it was him saying it, not a surrogate, it's a lie. That's what it comes down to. And I certainly hope that's not something he said, because it's not true. The only people that I've met with and spoken on the Senate have been Senator Mike Lee, Senator Rand Paul, and then I had an opportunity to speak briefly with Senator Perdue at the advance. But the idea or the charge that I would be an establishment candidate in the sense that he means I'm a big government Republican or I'm a cronyist is just ridiculous. And my voting record plays that out. My public statements play that out. When I first ran for office, the quote-unquote establishment desperately tried to find someone to run against me because they considered me a threat. And again, it's just frustrating, John, because there's no need for this. I'm a grassroots guy. I've always been a grassroots guy. I certainly hope EW didn't suggest otherwise. But again, this all plays out in the voting record. We're not talking about an unknown in this race who has no voting record to look at or no public statements. I've got all of those, and people can go and look at my record. They can look at what I want to do and what I've said I want to do. And what you're going to find is I'm a grassroots conservative. I always have been. I always will be, and that's why I'm running for the U.S. Senate.
All right, so I'm going to ask you essentially the same thing that I asked E.W. Jackson. And, I'm just looking for an honest assessment of this race going into it. Nick Freitas, no doubt, Corey Stewart is the heavy favorite going in. He's been in it since July. He's got the ability to raise money. He's got statewide name ID. He almost upset Ed Gillespie for the gubernatorial nomination and came from way behind to do that. Nobody thought he had a chance. He almost beat him. I mean, how do you beat Stewart? I mean, honestly.
I've said over and over again, and I'm dead serious about it. I'm not going to engage in the Republican circular firing squad that we seem to want to do every time we have a primary or a convention. And the way you win the nomination, I'm not beat Stewart, but the way you win the nomination is that you focus on issues that are actually relevant to people's lives, and you talk about the Republican philosophy in a way that actually resonates with people. And I know that sounds cliche, but I don't know how else to put it. It's true. When you take away the Republican part from the Republican creed and you just talk about free markets and opportunity and equal protection before the law and upholding the Constitution, people agree with it. And then the moment you put Republican in front of it, obviously some people are going to break away. But when you have an opportunity to just articulate what it is we believe in a way that empowers people at an individual level, that resonates across time, across space, across culture. There's a reason why millions of people want to immigrate to the United States every day, And it's not because of a big, overbearing socialist federal state. It's because we have the ability, regardless of who you were, who your parents were, or what your current station in society is, you have the ability to run a business, to build a family, to grow and prosper. And that's a powerful message, provided that we talk about it in a way that resonates with people. So if we do that, we win, period, the end, right? So that's what we're going to focus on doing. And again, Corey's going to run his race the way Corey needs to. I don't plan to come out and attack Corey. I think we can run on our own voting record. We can run our own merits and ideas, and we can win that way. And that's what everyone in this race should focus on doing, because I think we all agree that we don't want another 6 years of Tim Kaine.
The Republicans just got off a devastating defeat, Nick Freitas, in this past election, where they lost a minimum of 15 seats in the House, maybe more, depending on where the recount is. We might end up with a divided power. We might end up with a Democratic speaker. In all of the exit polls, I mean, President Trump just got hammered. Many people came out to say, you know what, I'm going to send that message. I don't want Trump. How is that going to change between now and November of 2018? What's going to be different?
Well, I think that right now, obviously, we've got to understand that the media attacks Trump relentlessly every day, all day, and they talk very little about what's actually been accomplished, whether it's the nomination of strong Supreme Court justices, whether it's the significant rollback of onerous regulations that have kept the economy stalled. And now we have tax reform. And everyone's going to say the same thing, right? The tax reform isn't perfect, but it certainly is a step in the right direction. And when the economy starts to improve, as it already has, and when it starts to expand and people start seeing themselves have more opportunities, they're going to start to question the narrative that is constantly coming out about Donald Trump from the media. Because, again, I think people understand he's never going to get a fair shake from him, but it's crossing the line from media bias to just an absolute assault on the White House. And people are tired of that. And again, when a coal miner in Southwest Virginia can finally provide their kids a halfway decent Christmas this year because they're not under assault by the federal government, that's going to resonate far more than the media complaining about some 3 a.m. tweet that the president launched. And I think that's the difference, is when we see 2018, we're actually going to get to see Republicans running on things that they said they were going to do and they actually got done. And that's critical. Everyone always talks about, well, when you run for office, what sort of a messaging are you going to use? Well, the chief message that you should run on when you're running for office is, this is what I said I was going to do, and this is what I actually did, and this is how it benefited you and the country. And I think we're going to be able to do a lot more of that in 2018 than we were able to do in 2017.
So, Nick, it all sounds great, but the reality of this is Democrats have won 10 consecutive races in Virginia. Their margins in Fairfax, Arlington, and Alexandria continue to grow. Now they're winning counties like Chesterfield. I mean, you just look at the math and you say, how can a Republican in Virginia ever win another statewide race? That's my question.
Well, again, I think some of it has to do with our messaging, and some of it has to do with doing what you said you were going to do once you get into elected office. Now, I can say you would be amazed at some of the people that publicly supported me in my district, because if you look at any metric, whether it's the Tea Party scorecard or the Family Foundation scorecard, VCDL, NRA, American Conservative Union, I have some of the highest scores of any member of the General Assembly, and yet I had people from the left coming out to support, not because I had compromised on my principles, but because when I sat down to talk with, let's say, a member of the Green Party, and they were concerned about ballot access, or they were concerned about industrial hemp, we sat down and we talked about it. And instead of spending 90% of our time on the 90% of things we disagreed with, we spent 90% of our time on the 10% of things we did agree with. And what they saw was that I was someone that could sit down with them. We could find the areas of agreement. I wasn't going to compromise my principles. They understood that and they respected that. But when we agreed on something, I would work to get it done in the General Assembly. And I think when we can talk about it, we talk about it from that perspective. We don't agree on everything. What do we agree on? Let's focus our attention there and let's get something done. because there's a couple of things that people are really frustrated with. They're frustrated with the divisiveness and the toxic nature of politics right now, and they're also frustrated with, on those things where everybody agrees something should be done, it instantly gets politicized, and now that's the Republican thing to get done or the Democrat thing to get done, instead of, no, this is just the right thing to get done. And if we all agree on it, then we shouldn't be holding it up over nitnoid bull that, quite frankly, doesn't affect anybody except people within the Beltway. So when we can do that, and we can show that we're effective and we're serious about doing it, then we can start to win over certain voters that, quite frankly, haven't considered the Republican Party for some time. And I that's the approach I'm going to take. Republican outreach can't be us inviting them to our meetings. Republican outreach is we go to their meetings, and we go into some pretty hostile situations, and we go in there with confidence, and we're willing to listen as well as respond. You see a huge change. And I always joke around, John, that I can't believe how well, being in the military and specifically in Army Special Forces Green Berets, which has a focus on unconventional warfare and counterinsurgency, I always say I can't believe how well it prepared me for domestic politics, simply because I found myself in situations all the time where I was sitting down and talking with tribal elders or talking with leaders of different groups where there may not have been a lot of room for cooperation, but we managed to find ways to make it work. But that starts with going to them, not demanding that they come to you, and then listening to the concerns, identifying these ones that are legitimate, and finding ways that you can solve them that, again, don't violate your principles. And it's not that hard if you're willing to take the time. But if you're just going to come out the gate and lambast everyone, well, then expect the walls to go up and nobody wants to talk to anybody else. Again, that's what we've got to get past, and I think I can do that.
Nick Freitas, are there any President Trump policies or campaign promises or policy initiatives that the president has that Nick Freitas takes issue with?
Off the top of my head, not at this point. No, I mean, there may have been some things that I would have tried a different approach with, but I've been very supportive of his tax reform policy. I've been very supportive of his regulatory reform policy. I mean, here in Virginia, we've been fighting a battle to just say that, okay, look, for every new regulation you pass, we want to see 2 antiquated ones get rid of. And that's been this huge battle that we've had a hard time getting done. And President Obama switched it to, 1 for 15. I mean, that was incredible. And so I think on his regulatory reform, on his tax reform policy, I think he's definitely moving us in the right direction with respect to those policies and getting input from key members of the Senate that I trust, people like Mike Lee, people like Rand Paul. Over on the House side, people like Tom Garrett and Dave Brad and others. So, no, I think he's moving in the right direction. The Supreme Court nominee, or the Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch, was just phenomenal. So, no, overall, I have to say I've been pleasantly surprised. Because I wasn't sure about Donald Trump in the primary. Looking at some of his past statements and his record, I wasn't sure what he was going to do. And, again, you're never going to agree with a chief executive 100% of the time. But I think on a lot of key issues that were really affecting this country negatively with our onerous regulatory system and our taxes, which were destroying small business, I think President Trump is definitely moving us in the right direction.
Now, what do you think about the president's majority on the FCC, led by Commissioner Ajit Pai, that is trying to undo President Obama's internet neutrality? How do you stand on that?
Well, I'll tell you what, if we stopped calling it net neutrality, which is essentially what the left named it, and we started calling it government control over the internet, I'm pretty sure most people would say, oh, my gosh, why would we ever want the government in control of the internet? That's something that we want out on the marketplace, to where producers and consumers can make their own decisions with respect to what they want their internet to look like. We get better access and we get more broad access going out to as many people as possible when we have this free market of ideas and exchange where people are able to customize their selections and producers are able to be responsive to consumers in a variety of markets. And net neutrality, i.e. government, more government control over the internet, prevented a lot of that from taking place. So I think you're going to see a new boom in innovation with respect to getting internet out to as many people as possible that you didn't see before. And you're also going to see the ability for people to purchase internet options in ways that they want, not the way the government says they should want them. So, no, I think rolling back net neutrality is a good idea, and I think we just got to be careful on allowing the left to basically set the agenda or set the tone by naming something, like net neutrality, which, oh gosh, well, that sounds fair. Well, it really isn't when you look at it. It's more government control, and it's a bad idea for the internet.
We're with Nick Freitas. Nick, let's get to foreign policy. You served your country courageously and admirably in Iraq and Afghanistan. The president just committing to putting another 5,000 troops in Afghanistan. Quite frankly, nobody can figure out why we're there, what the mission is, but the war machine goes on. If you're a U.S. Senator from Virginia, obviously you're going to be on foreign affairs, armed services. There's always a clamor for additional troops, military spending, for our economy. But the president was unable to articulate why we're sending an additional 5,000 troops to Afghanistan, and this after he campaigned vigorously on getting us out of these wars. How do you stand on it?
So I admire the fact that the president puts a lot of stock in listening to his commanders, because quite frankly, that was something that was missing for 8 years during the Obama administration. But I have to say, I think increasing the amount of troops and our commitment in Afghanistan right now is probably not the best course of action. Now, I do think that there's ways that we can engage over there that would be effective. Again, I think when we use a buy through and with strategy, where we actually work with allies on the ground as opposed to trying to take over a war effort or control it all from our side, I just think that's problematic, and it gets us into problems. But again, my solution on something like that would be to offer my advice and experience to the administration in such a way that where we could articulate a policy and develop a policy that is best for protecting the United States. The other thing too that I think is important here is we need to follow the Constitution with respect to deploying troops. There's two mechanisms for engaging in combat operations. You can declare war, or you can use letters of marque and reprisal. And I think, especially when you're fighting non-state actors, letters of marque and reprisal and other things along those lines is really an interesting and constitutional way in order to combat the problem. So again, I'm skeptical of any more or of any new troop deployments to Afghanistan at this point without a very, very clear way forward on what it is that we're trying to achieve. We clearly have to combat terrorist organizations, but let's do it in a way that's both constitutional and effective.
Nick Freitas, you are certainly up on the issues. No question about that. I appreciate your being with us, your candor, and your answers. If people want more info, Nick, on your campaign, where do they go?
So you can follow us on Facebook, or you can go to www.nickforsenate.com, and we have policy positions out there. We like to explain our philosophy, and we'll be putting a lot more up there with respect to videos and more issues shortly. All
right, website, more information, nickforsenate.com is all you have to do. Hey, Nick, thanks for being with us.